An indigenous woman looks across a river toward Borneo's forest. Somewhere inside that wall of green, an orangutan pulls itself through the canopy as rain darkens the leaves below. This is the Borneo most people recognize. Ancient jungle, rare animals, and a green horizon that appears too vast to damage. Then the camera rises. The forest ends at a straight road. Beyond it, identical rows of oil palms reach toward the horizon. A coal barge moves down a brown river. Smoke hangs above land that should be wet enough to resist fire. Borneo is not disappearing in one dramatic event. It is being divided into pieces, and every piece tells a different story. The island is shared by Indonesia, Malaysia, and Brunei. Their borders stop governments. They do not stop rivers, animals, fires, or the industries moving through the forest. The hidden Borneo is not an untouched wilderness. It is a living territory where roads can save a village or open a forest, where a plantation can create jobs or erase a family's land, and where a new national capital is now rising from a landscape already transformed by extraction. To understand why this island is so difficult to control, begin with its shape. Borneo is the third largest island on Earth. Indonesia governs most of it as Kalimantan. The Malaysian states of Sabah and Sarawak occupy the north, beside the small nation of Brunei. Near the center, mountains and high forests form a spine from which rivers flow in almost every direction. The heart of Borneo alone feeds 14 of the island's 20 major rivers. For generations, those rivers have been roads. Boats carry children to school, farmers to markets, fuel to settlements, timber toward mills, and mining equipment deeper inland. A place that appears sealed by jungle can be connected by water, while two communities separated by a ridge may remain days apart. Heavy rain changes those routes without warning. Rivers rise over landing points. Mud closes roads. In the lowlands, floods can spread across settlements and plantations. In the mountains, a short distance on a map can become a long journey around rock, current, and fallen trees. The animals evolved inside that vertical world. A Bornean orangutan spends much of its life above the ground, moving between branches and building nests in the canopy. When forest is cut into isolated blocks, a gap that looks narrow from the air can force an animal onto the ground, into a plantation, or toward people protecting crops. Researchers estimated that Borneo lost more than 100,000 orangutans between 1999 and 2015. Their models linked the decline to habitat loss, as well as direct killing. Logging and plantation expansion also affected where orangutans could survive. That is why a green patch on a satellite image does not guarantee a safe forest below. The same fragmentation affects other species. Borneo elephants survive mainly in the northeast. Proboscis monkeys follow rivers and mangroves. Sunda clouded leopards move almost invisibly beneath the canopy. Saltwater crocodiles enter lower rivers, while sun bears search for fruit, insects, and honey in forests that may already carry survey markers. These animals are not the island's greatest threat to people. The more powerful danger is the environment losing its balance. A cut slope can collapse in intense rain. A drained wetland can burn during drought. A river that once carried food can also carry sediment and pollution downstream. And those rivers are home, not empty corridors through wilderness. Dayak is an umbrella term for many distinct indigenous peoples, not the name of a single tribe. Communities such as the Iban, Kayan, Kenya, and many others have different languages, customs, and histories. Some people live in longhouses beside rivers. Others live in modern towns, work in cities, manage farms, or move between all of these worlds. Their relationship with the forest is practical as well as cultural. It can provide food, medicine, building materials, income, burial grounds, and the record of family boundaries. A map drawn in a distant office may show state forest or a concession. A community map may show orchards, hunting areas, old settlements, and graves. When those maps overlap, the conflict is not about an empty green space. It is about who has the authority to decide what that space becomes. The first major change often arrives as a road. By examining satellite images, researchers calculated that more than 270,000 kilometers of primary logging roads were opened across Borneo between 1973 and 2010. That is enough to circle Earth nearly 7 times. The road does not remove every tree. Selective logging targets valuable trunks, and a logged forest can still hold enormous biological value. The deeper change is access. Heavy equipment enters. The canopy opens. Dry debris accumulates. Hunters and settlers can travel farther. When the timber operation leaves, the route may remain for a plantation, a mine, or another wave of clearing. Over the same period, about 30% of the forest that existed in 1973 was gone by 2010. Most loss occurred in the lowlands, the same accessible terrain where biodiversity, rivers, farms, and commercial pressure collide. The rate has changed over time, and conservation has prevented some clearing. But every remaining corridor now matters more. Oil palm explains part of that transformation. Its fruit produces an efficient vegetable oil used in foods, soaps, cosmetics, and fuel. The crop supports workers, smallholders, companies, and public revenue across Indonesia and Malaysia. Treating everyone in the industry as a villain would hide the real problem. The problem is what happens when expansion replaces natural forest or enters land whose users were never given meaningful power in the decision. A plantation may look green from above, but rows of one crop cannot replace the structure of a rainforest. Roads and drainage channels alter water. Wildlife moves toward the remaining edges. Families can gain wages while losing access to land that supported food, materials, and independence. Human Rights Watch documented this conflict in 3 villages in West Kalimantan. Residents said plantation development absorbed farmland without adequate consultation or compensation. Drainage affected fresh water and soil. Protests brought intimidation and prosecution. It was one investigated case, not a verdict on every plantation. But it revealed how a land permit can become a human crisis long before the outside world sees a missing forest. If you want more documentaries that go beyond the postcard, give this video a like and subscribe, because the next layer can make the ground itself burn. Across parts of lowland Borneo, the forest grows over peat. This dark material forms when water slows decay and plant matter accumulates over thousands of years. As long as it stays wet, it stores extraordinary amounts of carbon. Drain it, and the system reverses. Oxygen enters. The surface sinks. During a severe dry season, fire can move from cleared vegetation into the soil. Flames may disappear while heat continues below ground, traveling through peat and returning somewhere else. Conventional firefighting cannot easily reach it. During the powerful El Nino of 2015, fires in Indonesia produced one of the worst smoke episodes observed by modern satellites. Parts of Kalimantan were covered for weeks. NASA reported an estimate that more than 43 million people across Indonesia inhaled toxic fumes. Schools closed, flights stopped, and regional air quality collapsed across boundaries that no customs post could control. The danger was not simply wildfire and not simply weather. Drought created the conditions. Drained and degraded land supplied the fuel. Fire used for clearing supplied many of the sparks. Peat turned a local burn into a regional emergency. Then there is what leaves the island. Coal from Kalimantan moves by truck, conveyor, and river barge toward power stations and export markets. Timber, palm oil, and minerals follow their own routes. From a city far away, Borneo can look remote. Economically, it is connected to supermarket shelves, construction sites, electricity grids, and global commodity prices. That connection creates a brutal contradiction. People in the interior need roads, reliable power, schools, clinics, and paid work. Refusing all development would preserve poverty, not paradise. But the old model often makes the forest pay first. A road is financed by the value expected to move along it. Once access exists, protection becomes harder and land becomes easier to divide. Now that contradiction has reached an extraordinary scale in East Kalimantan. Indonesia is building Nusantara, a future political capital intended to shift government functions away from Jakarta and distribute development beyond Java. Government plans describe a forest city with restoration, public transport, and large areas of green space. Construction has already placed a presidential palace, roads, housing, and public buildings into the hills. This is not a simple story of a pristine jungle being replaced by a city. Much of the site was previously altered by logging and plantations. Restoration could improve damaged land. A better planned city could avoid many failures that burden Jakarta, but the promise creates a difficult test. New roads can intensify pressure beyond the planned center. Water must support construction and future residents. Wildlife corridors must remain connected. Some indigenous Balak residents have expressed fear for ancestral land, graves, and historical sites. As construction continues, the formal transfer of capital status still depends on a presidential decree. Nusantara is therefore more than a city. It is a question built in concrete. Can Borneo develop without repeating the extractive pattern that shaped so much of its recent history? There are reasons the answer may still be yes. Indonesia, Malaysia, and Brunei agreed to cooperate across roughly 220,000 square kilometers in the heart of Borneo. Protected areas, community forests, wildlife corridors, and restoration projects preserve large connected landscapes. Research has also shown that forests reserved by indigenous communities can retain exceptional tree diversity, even inside heavily modified regions. The most important lesson is that damaged forest is not worthless forest. Logged land can recover. Peat can be rewetted. Wildlife can use corridors. Customary rights can be recognized. Plantations can increase production without expanding into remaining natural forest. Roads can be planned around the places that keep rivers and ecosystems functioning. None of this is easy, because Borneo is not one government, one economy, or one people. It is an island divided politically and connected ecologically. A decision upstream can change water downstream. That is why Borneo is worse than the postcard suggests, but not because its people or wildlife are hiding some primitive danger. The reality is more unsettling. Development does not have to destroy that system, but every project must recognize that once the connections are broken, planting isolated trees cannot rebuild an ancient forest on demand. Subscribe to Real Destination and become a channel member. Then continue with our documentary on the Congo, where another immense rainforest reveals what happens when rivers, resources, and distant demand collide far beyond the world's view.